to share those services and opportunities, to prepare students for the world of work. I think that's great.
Well, I want to again thank everyone for joining us today for our final Transition to Adulthood Week webinar Q&A presentation. We've been here every day this week from 3 to 4 talking to different experts, different folks in the community about transition to adulthood for individuals with disabilities. We usually do a live in-person conference one day. A lot of people show up. We've been doing it for 10 years. This would have been the 11th year, but we had to obviously put things virtual this year, put things online. It's been great though. I think everybody would agree that it's been different, but it's still been a really good way to get the information out there and take questions from parents, because parents have a lot of questions about these issues. So today we're going to talk about employment, and I am joined again today by two of my RIPIN colleagues. I'm here with Sue Donovan and Sharon Koshin, and they are part of our RIPIN PTIC Parent Training Information Center team. The PTIC does a lot of work on transition to adulthood, and they have a lot of both personal and professional experience with transitioning to adulthood. And we are very happy to be joined by our guest today. Jennifer Doucette is with us. If you want to say hello, Jennifer.
Hi, everyone. Glad to be here.
And Jennifer is the Regional Transition Coordinator for the Northern region of Rhode Island. And her Center of Excellence is the Transition to Employment for Youth in Transition. Prior to her role as Regional Transition Coordinator, Jen was the Vocational Services Coordinator at West Bay Collaborative, where she provided a variety of Office of Rehabilitation funded services to youth in transition and young adults, including pre-employment transition services. We're going to welcome back today for her second webinar this week, Joanne Del Angelo. Hello, Joanne.
Hi, hello everyone. It's great to be back.
Thank you for joining us again. Joanne's the Project Director, National Center for Innovation and System Improvement, and the East Bay Regional Transition Coordinator. She has over 25 years of professional experience in the areas of secondary education and transition, workforce development, project management and training, along with 4 years of experience in higher education as an academic learning specialist at Bryant University. And finally, we'd like to welcome Barbara Mulligan. Hello, Barbara. Barbara is the Assistant Administrator, Transition, Pre-ETS, and RIWorks. She's been employed with the Office of Rehabilitation Services, or ORS, for 20 years. She has served as a counselor in the Providence and Northern Rhode Island regions and was promoted to Supervisor of the Providence region in 2009. In 2018, after 9 years as a supervisor, she was promoted to the position of Assistant Administrator for Transition, Pre-ETS, and RIWorks. Thank you all three so much for joining us today for this talk. And I will turn it over to you to get us started.
Great. Thanks, Mark. We are so glad to be here. I know I'm going to speak for the three of us when I say this is one of our favorite topics is employment. So Mark did a wonderful introduction to the three of us. And we're going to kind of get it started, and we really welcome your questions and inquiries. And so feel free to, submit those. We'd love to answer any questions that you have. But I think the best place to start for any parent of a young adult or student entering those transition years is to talk further about Office of Rehabilitation Services and what they do in pre-employment transition services. So I'm going to let Barbara kind of take that away.
Great. I'll review the slide. So the Office of Rehab Services counselors are part of the IEP team. We have counselors that are assigned to each of the schools, non-public and public. The ORS counselor works in collaboration with the student, the family, the school system, and other providers through the transition process by providing services that focus on job exploration, exposure to work, and determining those level of need that the individual will need in moving towards competitive integrated employment. For Pre-ETS, Pre-ETS are used for in-school youth. Pre-ETS is for all students with disabilities. Pre-ETS came out of the 2014 Workforce Investment Opportunities Act, and it really has allowed us to expand our services. It allows us to work with more students and working with them earlier in the transition process. And I think what's really important is that students don't need to be open with ORS and apply through the application process in order to receive pre-ETS services.
Great. So Barbara, I'm sure a lot of people are kind of wondering more about, so there's these services available for ORS for in-school youth. So what does that timeline look like? And when should parents expect to find out about pre-ETS, and how do they get these services for their students?
So the timeline, our counselors are, like we said, are in all of the schools, and they're working with the teachers and the contact person that we have in the school. And we talk about making that referral at the end of the 9th grade or 3 years prior to the exit of school. So it's really important that we start those transition services, those pre-ETS services earlier in the process, so that the student is, they're ready as they're exiting school and they've had a lot of great experiences. ORS services are discussed at the IEP or the Career Development Plan meeting. A release for informations are signed at that time so that the school can forward us any educational information to the counselor, so that we know what some of the needs are already identified, so that we can make those experiences the best that they can be. The school district contact person completes that referral form. So our counselors are in contact with the school. They're at the school. They have this contact there that they're working with to make those referrals. Senior year obligations may impede the ability to focus on vocational programming and out-of-school activities. So this is also why it's really important that we start that process earlier, because senior year is an important year. There are so many things that are going on, and we really don't want the pre-ETS services to kind of get in the way of any of that stuff. So, you know, that's important. Having a plan for what happens after school requires coordination and teamwork. So the pre-ETS, the ORS counselor is working with the school, and in turn, we're also working with the vendors that we work with as a team, talking about what's the next step. Where are we moving? We're providing all these great services while the students are in school, and where is that going to lead us for after school or when school ends?
I'm sure a lot of people out there are kind of wondering, what exactly are these services? And so here are some of the services that are covered under pre-employment transition services. And I think it's important to kind of note that these services are not meant to supplant or take the place of any services that are being provided by the school as part of the transition services in that transition IEP, but it's meant to supplement what the school is going to do. So this is a great partner, and ORS is a great partner to what your son or daughter should be doing while they're in school. And so there's 5 different pre-employment transition service areas that kind of allow students to get prepared for life after high school, with the hope that by providing these services while they're still in school, they're going to gain the knowledge and skills necessary to get out of school and be able to potentially obtain their own job, or with supports get a job and maintain a job, and kind of have a better focused plan of what they're going to do. So that way they're not graduating from school and kind of floundering for a while. They can hopefully hit the ground running. And so as you can see on this slide, there's a lot of different services that are available through pre-employment transition services. So you have job exploration services, you have career chats, and these are all services that can be provided to students while they're still in school. And I don't want to go through and kind of spend time explaining. I want to give people time to ask their own questions. So I don't know, Mark, if we have any questions coming in that you want us to start to kind of touch upon.
So not at the moment, but I do want to remind our audience, and I apologize, I didn't mention this at the top. We definitely want your questions. If you're with us on Zoom, you can type your questions right into the chat. You can click the Q&A button on Zoom, type in your questions for our panelists today. If you're watching our live streams on Facebook or on our YouTube channel, type your question into the comments, use the chat function there. Our panelists are here to answer your questions today, so please don't be shy. But as of right now, I don't have any questions from the audience.
Okay.
I actually would like to just add and enhance what Jen and Barbara have said in regards to looking at employment. And when we think of opportunities after high school or possibilities for a world that involves work after high school, really is the presumption of adulthood. And, all of us as adults, we just think adults work, right? So as we begin to start talking to students in middle school with our middle school pilots, right, work readiness, about seeing themselves, learning about themselves, practicing workplace skills, understanding and taking a look at who they are in this process of career development, their interests, all of that exploration starts early and continues with these services, so that by the time they move through middle school into high school, we're doing more work with them. Teachers are doing more work with them. They're doing more work with their peers. They're talking more and with a better understanding about who they are and how they want to live their life, and that's self-determination and their self-advocacy, being better at being able to use their voice to express that. But they can't do any of that if they don't have a frame of reference. So all of these services and what's happening in school and their, as we say in their IEP and their transition page, and these complementary, collaborative services just enhances that process, but allows students just more opportunity to begin to see and envision a future with many possibilities, and that they are in charge of. So this is exciting that we do this in Rhode Island, meaning that we have these great collaborative partnerships, and we see the importance of it, and starting young and offer services one step at a time, one family at a time, one student at a time.
That's excellent. Thank you, Joanne. We do have one question now. My son, the questioner writes, my son has an intellectual disability and requires a one-to-one at school. Is he still a candidate for employment, and what would that look like?
For sure. And so I'm not sure how old this individual's son is, but the hope would be while in school, the school would start those kind of building blocks of getting your son or daughter, your son in this case, kind of exposed to work. And then with supports going out in the community with increasing frequency, and being able to kind of work on seeing how independent, or are there ways to kind of fade supports as your son kind of progresses through his high school career. And if he's going to stay on for further transition services, those types of experiences might get more frequent and kind of be more of the focus towards the end of school. And I know Barbara will probably want to touch upon this a little bit more, how then ORS can kind of work in concert with BHDDH with the hope that, if your son might qualify for adult services through BHDDH Division of Developmental Disabilities.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. So we would be at those IEP or the CDP meetings talking about what role does ORS have, what has the school already done, and like Jen had mentioned earlier, how can we enhance what the school is doing and elaborate on some of this and do some career exploration, and what are those interests, and how can we get the student out in the community and with the supports that they might need, and then what will that look like after they exit school, between our services and the adult services.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So absolutely, yes.
Many of the families that we're working with at RIPIN, we encourage for their students to participate in volunteer opportunities, whether it's at school or their church or their community organizations, and that can be a nice bridge to paid employment.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that really connects back to what we were talking about the other day, as far as community participation, and how that can really be a stepping stone as part of not just preparing for employment, but just being an adult member of the community. I wonder if there are any other examples or any other ideas like that of different activities that families could encourage, youth to take part in outside of school?
How about job shadowing? I know that many of the service providers in Rhode Island participate in Take Your Legislator to Work Day, so that the folks that are governing can see some of the great stuff that our kids with disabilities are doing in the workplace. But I think, bring your kiddo to work day. I know we've done it in the past at RIPIN on an informal basis. And I think it's great. And I know one of the staff, her daughter had a little setup right next to her desk, and she made her own sign. And I think she was in 5th grade, but she became like the admin assistant for the day, and she just loved it. So now she asked her mother, when are we going back to the office? But it's nice. It's nice when our kids can tap into, go with Uncle Joe, to the garage today, and you want to be a mechanic. Okay, let's see what it's really like to be a mechanic, especially since you don't like getting your hands dirty. So, there's some things that you just have to try first.
And that makes me think about, Sue, a little bit what we've, I think, talked about, in the past, to just get them excited about the world and the community that they're part of, right? That we're all part of. And, even just starting with the family, Uncle Joe's a mechanic. What do the mechanics do? Have you ever been, to his workplace? I mean, think about it. Think of all of us. Like, I think of my family and I'm like, what does my brother-in-law do? Like, you know what I mean? Like, what is a day in the life of him? Like, what is it like? So even just that with the purposeful questions, hey, let's ask, let's have that conversation. And then that leads to something else. So, and that's informal and natural and organic and authentic. And that builds that curiosity, which then tells us more about, who this person is, like we do with ourselves, like we're exploring our career journeys, right? Some of us know right from the beginning. When I was young, I wanted to either be a teacher or a marine biologist because I love the ocean, right? And then just found, pieces of me as I learned that, because I like to talk and explain things, that kind of goes here. And so I just think, and I hope getting to your question and not going a little too off the rails, Mark, but I think if we just have conversations, and ask the questions about, just that simple question, what do you want to do when you grow up, kind of thing. Asking that conversation to anyone and everyone, right? So the gentleman that spoke said, my son has an intellectual and developmental disability. Okay, and your son likes this, or wait, does he like to do this? And who is he? And that's where we start. And then with all the experts in schools and these programs, right, what's happening in school, we can assist on opening up the career awareness and career exploration and all of those pieces of career development.
Joanne, if I can just tie that in with the IEP process.
Yes,
one of the 3 areas of transition questions that we talk about is employment. So when your student transitions from an elementary IEP to a secondary IEP, those transition pages are added to the IEP. So that's a perfect opportunity for families to begin to have this conversation.
Yes. Great. Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
And I
Sharon,
think a lot of activities that you do in your community, whether it's volunteer, whether it's just getting out and interacting, household activities that foster independence.
Yes.
All of that ties into how somebody is on the job and responsibility on the job. So the more independence that you can work at home, out in the community, all is it leads into employment and independence at the job, and communicating with coworkers. So little things that you don't normally think of are important every day. they're all transferable into employment.
And I actually have an interesting kind of anecdote to tie into that, Barbara. Even just those small little tasks that you can do at home. I'll give you an example. I had a young man that he was trying out a job site as part of one of these Pre-ETS services, and the job site had asked him to sweep the floor. And he even just didn't know something that we all take for granted on how to kind of sweep, and kind of the technique behind it of you want to get all those lots, you kind of put everything in a bigger pile to then put it into the dustpan. He didn't even have a concept of how to do that. And so I think that's such a great point, that even just the smallest tasks at home to kind of foster independence, especially in these times where the ability to get out into your community and be exposed to some of those tasks is so much more limited. There's so many ways you can kind of get creative at home and do things at home. I know, with that being said, I have children myself. Sometimes it's easier when there's somebody other than the parent requesting that they do these tasks. So sometimes that you can get some resistance on that. And the other thing that I wanted to kind of add to, as far as with the IEP process, is that, you know, it's building blocks. And like Sharon said, you know, once your son or daughter turns 14, they're going to get a transition IEP. And then there's really going to be that shift to looking at those post-school goals in those three areas that Sharon mentioned. And so it's going to start small, and it kind of ties in with the different career development stages that we look at, which is career awareness, career exploration, and kind of just building upon that, you know, your son or daughter who's 14, they're not going to be expected to know what they want to do when they grow up at 14. And you're going to really use that transition assessment process to kind of help flesh that out a little bit better. And so, and as a reminder, the IEP is very much a fluid document. It's not set in stone. And so one year, the IEP could look very different from the next year as far as those post-school goals, and what are those transition services going to be to kind of help them achieve those post-school goals, with the hope that, you know, they'll be kind of building upon that. And as they start to become exposed to different careers and different knowledge about themselves, that they can kind of narrow that focus down as well.
So I want to share a comment that we got on our Facebook page just now, saying families should do an application with BHDDH for something called a person-centered supported employment program. That this person is mentioning a person-centered employment program for folks who have not worked and need some time to discover what they want to do and resources they might need. I'm not sure if that's something any of you are familiar with, or if that could be potentially an option for folks.
So that is specifically for young adults who are in that process of becoming eligible for DD services through BHDDH. And that's called the PSEP program for short. I am not 100% familiar with it, but I have some knowledge of it, and my other counterparts can feel free to jump in whenever. But that is a great option. And that would be a situation where you'd want to talk further with your social caseworker through Division of Developmental Disabilities.
Yeah,
Definitely. Yeah, well, I'm sorry, Barbara, go ahead.
So the student would be filling out an application for a BHDDH while they're in school. And then as they exit school, they would have funding through BHDDH, and the PSEP program is a part of that. So yes, it starts with applying for BHDDH services, you know, while they're in school, and then PSEP would come after they exit school and they're looking for continuing employment after into adulthood.
Excellent. Thank you for that.
And if I could
please.
add, when we look at, you know, PSEP, you know, that's an acronym, you know, alphabet soup. It's person-centered, you know, it's person-centered employment, you know, planning. That they're really looking at, you know, strategies like discovery and taking time to get to know this individual in community, and with a goal of employment in their adult life. So yeah, so it's person-centered employment.
The nice thing too are the services that a student would be getting while they're in high school, those Pre-ETS services, that job exploration that, like Jen had talked about, the career awareness, and, you know, some work experiences that they're getting in high school while they're still students will only enhance those services if they were to move into PSEP.
Yes.
Excellent. Very good. And pre-ETS services being pre-ETS, pre-employment transition services. And we have a question about that now. How do the pre-employment transition services work when kids are in academics all day? So they're not in a life skill program that builds in time during the school day to do sort of work experience. They don't have that option. How would pre-ETS or pre-employment transition services work in that situation?
Good question.
So pre-employment transition services are very individualized. So the counselor will be meeting with the family and the student and talking about the services that are available, and then working with the student and the school as far as when are the best opportunities to provide the services. So yeah, so some of the services, they wouldn't take necessary place during the school hour, school day. You know, we have a multitude of different services that happen at different times, but it's definitely the time frame would be what works best for the student and the family.
And I think just to kind of emphasize what Barbara said, that these are all individualized services. So it's not like it's not like you go through and you kind of hit every single service. It's individualized to what's going to be most appropriate for your son or daughter. Where are they kind of at in that kind of career development spectrum? And what do they need to kind of focus in on? And then what's going to work best for them and their schedule as well.
Mm-hmm. And
I think what Jen had, what Jen had mentioned earlier is that the schools are doing a lot of great transition work. So, and we're just coming in and providing additional to that. So, so yeah, it's very individualized. So a student might come to us and they've had a lot of great career exploration already, and they have an idea of what they might want to do. And then we would take it from there and provide different, and then we might have another student who's at the very beginning of that exploration, and we need to kind of start with them where they're at. So yes, it is very individualized. Everybody is different. And what services one student gets, it could be completely different than another student, and it's all based on where they're at.
That's great to hear. And it sounds like like a lot of things we've been talking about all week, really, it's person centered. It's focusing on the individual. It's going to be strengths based, and it's going to build off of that. And while you may have a whole sort of menu of different services, you folks work with parents and work with the individual to kind of identify what's going to be the most supportive and really focus on that. So that sounds really great. Question about job coaches, and if maybe one of you, I'm not sure who wants to take this, could talk a little bit about the role of a job coach.
So a job coach is there, just as the name implies, to coach the individual when they're at work, whether that be they're kind of doing some of these services while in school, and so it's more a learning opportunity, or when an individual is actually employed. And so really, when I used to job coach, kind of the tact I took was, I want to assume independence, and that a job coach's job is to kind of fade into the background for all intents and purposes. And so kind of see where is the support needed and provide support with the goal of increasing independence. And so the job coach shouldn't be there to do the job for the individual. They're there to kind of help support them to learn the job, to master the skills, to recall the skills, with the goal. And whenever I train job coaches, it's always you're job coaching with the end in mind of you're looking to fade out as much as possible. And so as a job coach, you're there to kind of help them learn and then kind of fade back to see, can they now do this on their own? And I think just like for parents out there of younger children, you really want to let them kind of try it on their own and then provide supports as needed.
And in addition to what Jen said in looking at the end in mind, absolutely building in the strategies. So it was the coach looking at what is needed, giving the individual the tools to practice, and we coach accordingly along the way. because without something to hold on to, without something there, then you don't have anything. So, and that's what's going to build the independence, teach the skill.
Yeah, and a job coach is really should be a great resource for both the employer and the employee.
Yes.
That a job coach would then be able to suggest some potentially reasonable accommodations or some natural supports on a job site so that the employee or the individual does not have to be so dependent on the job coach. And I've even seen some situations where job coaches have suggested some accommodations that an employer has said, wow, you know, that's a really great idea. That's really efficient. I'm going to use this with all my employees. And I really like that strategy that you've given me. Great question, though.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, thank you all. That's great. So talking about these experiences through the different employment transition services and different options that folks have, I want to ask now, how does that work under the current circumstances of this pandemic? And how have services had to adapt, you know, if kids aren't able to maybe go to a job site under these conditions? And I hope that folks watching this video a year from now find that this is completely irrelevant to them. But right now, in this moment, it's very much all around us. So I wonder if any of you could comment on how we've been able to adapt some of these services.
Barbara, I'll let you kind of get us started off talking about maybe some of those virtual services. That might be a good way to start.
Yes. So, yeah, obviously back in March, it was a big challenge. We were kind of hit with it. You know, we had to figure out something, and we didn't want things to stop. That it was important that we continue moving forward. We are lucky that we work with a lot of great vendors, you know, the schools. So we were able to adjust our services so that we are still providing those virtually. So we do have like job explorations that we're still able to do virtually, which that's that first step where we're getting a lot of that career information. Those services, naturally, we can do those virtually. We also have, we did our summer work experiences. Every summer we have about 250 students that participate, and they get out and they're working. And we were able to provide that, again, to almost 200 students virtually, and being very creative about work-based services. What does that look like? And connecting with employers in a different way. And this year we've expanded services where from those summer employment experiences, we're doing career chats where we're connecting with employers so that students are hearing directly from some of those career areas that they're interested in, and hearing from those employers. You took the screen off, so now I can't think of the some of the service. No, that's okay. That's okay. Don't worry about it. And we expanded a service for 9th and 10th graders that we're able to provide virtually. While we're not able to get as many students out in the community doing, really physically doing the jobs, we are still having them connect with employers because that's really important, learning about the different types of jobs. And some students are still getting out, and some students are still able to do jobs with employers virtually. So there are virtual jobs that are coming out of this. So maybe there's a silver lining in all of this.
That's really cool to hear. I mean, thinking that there are only so many types of jobs that can transition to being virtual and being in a remote workplace. So that limits kind of the available pool. But to know that there are still opportunities for young people with different abilities and disabilities to take part in some of that, I don't know, I find that really great to hear.
Mm-hmm. And employers, this is how they do business. They're constantly on conference calls and, using, Google Meet, Zoom, and chatting and meetings and doing their work virtually. You can work anywhere today, even pre-COVID. So we're finding, and Barbara, please add to this, that we're able to access more opportunity for students, more connections for employers that are willing to take 15 minutes out of their day or 30 minutes out of their day and chat, or have some questions, or do a quick virtual tour. There's so much more that we're able to do. So I agree with that silver lining that's happening as well. And yes, there are schools and there are students that are out in the community, as well. It's a challenge, but we're really looking at finding ways we wouldn't even have thought possible, and it's the connections that are starting. So
yeah, and just like we had to turn around and do things virtually, businesses had to turn around and do things virtually.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
so there will be definitely more opportunities, different, in the future with business. So
last month in October, I had an opportunity to participate on 2 different webinars that RIPIN hosted. Real work, real talk about real work. And on the first aired on October 22nd, and we had a panel of young adults that were connected to and receiving services through the Division of Developmental Disabilities. Some of them were working with ORS or former clients of ORS, and they talked about their experience in getting a job, keeping a job, changing jobs, and their reasons for why they want to work. And then the following, on the 29th, the following week, we had a panel of parents and siblings of loved ones who were doing that, who were working and also, receiving services through the Division of Developmental Disabilities. And the first, you've got to check it out. You got to, not right now, but after this is over, your next thing, go to go to the RIPIN YouTube channel and check it out. Real talk about real work. And they were just phenomenal. They really exceeded my expectations. But I walked away, these young adults, they wanted to work, they wanted to get a job. And many of them said they liked that social connection and making friends, and they liked having money to spend. And who doesn't, right? Like, I really, I admire all of their effort and their enthusiasm. And then the following week, when we had the panel with parents and the sibling, it really didn't matter what the individual, what the loved one, where they were at, what their strengths or needs were, but we all wanted the same thing, and we all had the same fears, a lot of the same fears. And, we don't want, our child to be hurt out in, in the community. We're afraid, we're fearful that they're going to be taken advantage of. We're fearful that they may lose valuable benefits that they need. And so it was really interesting to be able to even connect people with very different experiences and different expectations. And so I strongly suggest that everyone check out those 2 webinars. They were very great information. And I felt better after I, sat back and, watched it and thought, wow, that's not far off from what I was thinking. And then today, of course, as part of our transition conference, Jean Fay, a benefits planning specialist, we have a recording on the RIPIN website on Friday, today's schedule on the transition conference page, with her presentation, which is really like a community information session about benefits planning, so that you can make an informed choice. And I know as a parent, I thought she was going to lose everything if she went to work. I thought, oh, this will be a disaster, right? I mean, she's going to lose the cash, she'll lose the health insurance, then, she won't be able to work and this and that. And it really worked out very well. We really struck a work, life, school balance. So really, when you have the time, check out those resources as well.
Yeah, and you can get to all of those resources, great videos, on-demand webinars, really, really helpful stuff. If you go to RIPIN, www.ripin.org, our website, you can find a link to everything associated with this week's conference that you can view anytime, anytime that works for you, and lots of other resources as well. And I'm glad you mentioned that, Sue, the part about the fear of the benefits, because I think that that was one of the big concerns that came up when we did those panels. And I think that for folks who, you should definitely look at those resources and figure out sort of what could work for you. But I think it's good to remind parents that, hey, it's not necessarily going to be the impact that you're afraid. There are different options that you might have to make it work, to allow your son or daughter to experience work and go out and experience that independence. I want to remind our audience on Facebook, on YouTube, here on Zoom, you can submit your questions anytime for our panelists. You can type them right into the chat function, type them in the comments section on Facebook, and I will relay them to our panelists, who will do their best to answer them for you, of course. One question right now, as a parent, the questioner writes, what should I be seeing? What should I be expecting from the school at this point with my 15-year-old? So you've got a teenager, young adult, basically in school at this point. What should the parent be seeing? What should they be expecting?
So I'll jump in. So as far as for employment, they would be at the IEP meeting. ORS would be invited to that, and we would start talking about what are the next steps. You know, doing a job exploration, or so that would be the first step as far as looking at employment. You know, what has the school done already, and you know, what are those next steps? So they would be referred to us. They would be invited. Our counselor would be invited to the IEP. We would talk with the student and the family, and we would start that process and getting them involved with ORS and Pre-ETS, job explorations, and then whatever comes from that.
Yep.
15 is also a good time to start, or if you haven't already, working on those self-advocacy skills and practicing that, as well as interest inventories. You know, what do you like? And the volunteer opportunities, like we talked about earlier, that's a good, you know, because I remember at 15, oh, I want a job, you know, and nobody will hire me. Okay, well, you know, there are some other things that you can be doing, and working on those soft skills, which are so important. You know,
Yep.
You can't teach common sense. You know, folks need to be able to show up to work on time, and they need to be able to self-regulate, and they need to be able to work like as a team, right? And we take that for granted often. Employers can teach the job, but those soft skills, those are things that we need to be working on at home and in school before we get into the employment arena.
I'll follow up with you, Sue, and that is, it's a good time for students to start exploring things like, do I need timers to you know, clock a 15-minute break? What kind of fidgets do I need to keep my hands busy? What kind of executive functioning, what kind of organization do I need to start working on? Those are all questions, again, that while you've got the support of the IEP team around you, you've got occupational therapists, you've got psychologists, you've got social workers, you've got special educators in the room. They can all be working. And if you look at the IEP, there's a couple of different opportunities within the IEP that you could address those goals, either on the transition page or as an accommodation where the student is taking the onus of going up to the teacher and showing that willingness to take the first step of their writing their homework down. Or maybe it's a goal for somebody that needs to have the skill taught to them. Maybe they need to be taught how to do organization, and that can be addressed as an executive functioning goal under the IEP. So there's lots of opportunity.
And in addition to what you said, Sue, and yes, Sharon, regarding the lens from the employer perspective, the more experiences that our students are involved in, okay, in the community. So whether it's labeled volunteer or things that they're doing informally or formally, those are going to be frame of references for them so that when they are interviewing or preparing for an interview, they have examples. They have real life examples that they themselves have experienced. And that's really good because employers want to know who you are and how you can fit into their work culture. So the more that we encourage them to engage in their community and in activities, they'll learn more about themselves, have an example or examples for employers in interviews, and it's just a nice synergy, you know, and they'll feel more confident. Because when I was watching the panel you were talking about, because I viewed what you were talking about earlier, Sue, with you know, the employment, that was so energizing. Because the conversations and the comments that were made came from a place of purpose, that they could give examples of what they've done. No prompts needed because they lived it, and that was really grand. So, and employers want to see that.
And I think that's what families don't realize is how transferable all these things are to employment, you know, things that are happening at home, you know, yeah. So
that's so true. And knowing what you need to be successful, knowing yourself, that's a great skill. And that takes time to develop, but that's also something that you can work on as well as a family. You know, I notice that you're often late if you're not wearing your watch. I notice that you forget some appointments if you don't have your cell phone. You know, the other day we were talking about so many different apps now and the technology that benefits students with disabilities. They're really, you know, we're very grateful for many of the applications and the technology that we can have and use today.
Yeah, I think that reminds me of another sort of kind of theme that I've been seeing this week, in this idea that it can be difficult when it's your child to see all of the strengths and to see how some of those could translate to whether it's career or college or whatever, you know, adult experience. It's really great to have folks like all of you who can, you know, from kind of that outsider perspective, point out to parents like, well, you know, actually he's really good at, you know, showing up on time, or he's actually quite responsible, or she's actually very attentive when it's something that she's interested in. And it's, I think it's really important to be able to share that with parents, because when it's your kid, when it's so close, it can be hard to see. I want to remind everybody that if you have more questions about this topic or similar related topics, you can call RIPIN 401-270-0101 for more one-on-one support, for whether it's things like my child's IEP, I have questions, I need more from the school, or I don't know how to interact with my school. How do I reach out to those folks? We're here to answer those questions. We are staffed by peer professionals at RIPIN, and that means that basically, if you call us, 9 times out of 10, you're going to talk to somebody who not only works on these issues every day, but has lived them in real life. Their own child or their own sibling has gone through some of these transition services, has gone through these special education IEP processes. So they have that firsthand experience, which is going to help you in a way that someone who maybe hasn't gone through it wouldn't be able to. So you can give us a call at 401-270-0101. Talk to our peer professionals. You can send us an email at callcenter@ripin.org, and we will do our best to help you. We're getting close to the end. I just want to ask our panelists if there are any last thoughts that you'd like to share, any final comments that you want our audience to hear before we wrap up.
I think my biggest thing is it's never too early to start talking about work. I think my poor children, because of what I do for work, you know, we go into the supermarket. I'm like, what do you think that person does for work? What do you think their day is like? Do you think you could do something like that? Just the more conversations you can have and the more you can kind of open your children's eyes to what is out there. Even as an adult, I kind of floundered because I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. And so it's never too early to start talking about it.
I'll follow up with you, Jen, and my advice would be to find out not only what you want to do, but what you don't want to do, because that's just as important. And taking advantage of all those interest inventories that those special educators are doing with your kids, because that will really, you'll start to see a pattern, whether they like quiet spaces, whether they like to be with people, maybe they're very organized. Those trends will start to be pulled out as strengths on the individual.
Yeah, so true, Sharon. Yeah, go ahead, Barbara, but so true.
And I just wanted to add, you know, we've given a lot of information here. So if there's any questions, you know, about VR services and Pre-ETS, feel free to connect. You can connect with me or even at RIPIN. And there are a lot of times that they connect with me if they have a question too. So yes, feel free to connect with us. So questions are great, you know.
And, you know, there's no right or wrong answer, you know, and it's going to take a lifetime. I mean, you think of all of us too, on our journey, you know, life is a journey. It's one of exploration. There's no question that cannot be answered somewhere, and it is never too early, you know, as Jen said. And, you know, Sharon, what do you really love and what you know you don't, and what you need, you know, to get through things that are challenging. You know, things that are easy, you got that, but other stuff you don't, but it's also part of life. So it is just something that it'll take time. It's one step at a time, and utilize the supports that you have. And thank you.
We have a colleague who often tells a story about her first job scooping ice cream. And she knew that she wouldn't be doing that forever. But it was a stepping stone to her second job. And it's, you know, it's a good idea to help coach kids around. You know, it may not be the perfect job, you know, they may find a lot of excuses of why it won't work. But you have to look at the reasons why it would work, you know, and build your skills.
Excellent. I want to again thank Barbara Mulligan, Joanne Del Angelo, Jennifer Doucette. I want to thank you for being with us today, sharing all of this super helpful information. Thanks to my RIPIN colleagues, Sue Donovan, Sharon Koshin, for helping guide these conversations, not just today, but all week. And this brings us to the end of Transition to Adulthood Week, our first ever Transition to Adulthood virtual conference week. We hope that you found it helpful and informative. None of this information, none of these webinars are going away. You can access them on the RIPIN website from now until forever. If you want to refer back to any of these, catch any of the webinars you might have missed, it's all going to be there for you. But we want to thank you for joining us and for helping make this Transition to Adulthood Week a success. I want to wish you all a good afternoon. Stay safe, stay healthy, stay at home when you can, and take care of yourselves. Thank you again.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks. Thank you.